bears. We're determined and we just don't care who we play or who we maul. Our team's gonna rule them all. We're proud and we're tough. We're not stopping till we've had enough. We're mean, we're on the prowl. Our team's gonna knock them out. Everybody's gonna scream and shout.
The name The Bears, where did that all come from?
That all started with the Big Bear supermarket at Neutral Bay back in the 50s, and it became a sponsor in those days, as sponsors of course weren't on jumpers or as they are today, but it became a sponsor of the club, and hence the Bear started and has been on the jumper ever since.
Well, I was born in the Eastern Cape province, and I was educated at Marist Brothers and played rugby, which you did in South Africa. Unless you had one leg shorter than the other, you played rugby, and that's where I started my career in the Eastern Province. I went to the 1956 Springbok trials for the tour to Australia and New Zealand, but didn't make the team. And in 1957 I was invited to go up to Northern Rhodesia up on the Copperbelt to work in my trade as a fitter on the mines in Northern Rhodesia, and played a season there, and thoroughly enjoyed myself playing rugby.
In our backyard of a weekend, I used to hear this big roar of the crowd, and I'd just to go and ask my mother or father or my brothers or sisters, what was that noise, what was everybody singing out about, and they said that was the North Sydney League team playing down at the Oval, and I asked them one day would they take me down to see them play, which they did. And because that was an eye-opener to me to walk in North Sydney Oval, and of course there was quite a big crowd there then, and to watch the game. But then in my heart, my hopes was achieved that one day maybe I could play for the Bears.
Yes, I did play in South Africa at the time when apartheid was the in thing. It was just part of your life. It was, you know, you weren't aware of any alternatives until all the good things that have gone on in the country now. But we enjoyed a good life, and the rugby spectators were mad, fanatical about the game, and it was very pleasing to be in that environment. You know, we had a lot of support, and any touring teams that came out to South Africa really had the job against them with the local support, you know.
Well, born and bred in St Leonard's, so North Sydney through and through, and played junior football once, about 14. Started 1 year with Greenwich, and then switched over where all the mates were out and went out to play at Mossman, which I played three. Went through the D grade and the C grade, and from there played President's Cup in the juniors, represented North Sydney, got the first taste of the red and black, and was fortunate in '59 to be called up to North Sydney after the President's Cup was, as it was then, was the knockout competition, and I got a telegram to get up to the Redfern Oval, and it was magic to wear the red and black. That's all we live for, because being born and bred in the area.
No, I'd never heard of the game of rugby league. It was a dirty word in South Africa even in those early days. They did try to get an exhibition game between the British and French team on their way back to the UK from a World Cup series in Australia, but that was a bit of a farce. And other than that, I had no idea what rugby league was about. In fact, the spectators there used to laugh at the play the ball. They said it was a monkey scrum, they called it, with two players locked together to get the game resumed. But no, I'd never heard of rugby league at all.
What happened to one of their players?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know this. I didn't know the fella concerned until later when I went over to England, but Billy Boston, who was then one of the best wingers in the game, and in the game ever was, actually. And being a coloured from Wales, a coloured fellow was not allowed to enter South Africa, so he went directly home to the UK, and the rest of the British team went to Joburg to play 2 games against the Frenchmen.
When you grow up as a child and you play a combination of the two codes, then I think it would be a fair assessment to say that your playing style as an adult has got to reflect your background. It's nothing to do with that I didn't see myself as a rugby union style centre. I just saw myself as a centre. I think union was easier to play as a centre than league because you had phase play. So we scored a lot of tries from the second and third phase rugby. And that's a good thing to learn. In rugby league, you're one-on-one and you have set play. The momentum stops and you set yourself, and I think you've got to beat that opposing player. So I think playing centre for rugby league was definitely harder than playing rugby union. But I wouldn't say at all that I didn't ever consider myself a rugby union player playing rugby league. Never.
And I got a letter from a fellow who was a school teacher, high school teacher, who lived in Rhodesia, and he had remained in contact with his beloved Wigan. And Jack Cunliffe, the then Wigan fullback, was getting in his early 30s and they were looking for a replacement fullback. So this guy acted on behalf of the club and wrote me a letter. And I'd never heard of rugby league, as I said a moment ago, but it was exciting and it was an adventure, and I had planned to go overseas and do work in holiday type thing. So I said, yes, you got me, and off I went over to Wigan on a 5-year contract, simple as that. But I didn't know what I was going to, I've got to be honest. Fortunately, Wigan was a top side, but I could have gone to one of the lower Yorkshire clubs and end up getting my brain scrambled, but I was very lucky. We had a lot of good players, and I took a while to settle down with the conditions and the game, but I thoroughly enjoyed it once I got into the scheme of things.
Watched my brother play football, and then I followed the junior league of the Narrabeen A and B grade every weekend.
And was that when you first met Ken?
No, I didn't know Ken before then, but he was at those games, but I was following him, but he didn't know me. I knew of Ken Irvine because we used to go to the league local dances, the police boys at North Sydney Police Boys Saturday night, and Lane Cove Town Hall on Tuesday nights, and Chatswood Dispensary, and he went to all these dances. So one night there he asked me to dance. So we had a few dances and he asked me to go home, and that was it. I went with him from then on, the next day, and then 3 years later I married him. I met him in 17, and he played for North 18. The three games, which his father really didn't want him to play. He thought he was a bit young to play for first grade 18.
Well, basically, it was one of the first few games of first grade I had played. I think it was about the third first grade game I'd played, and I was picked on the wing. We played against Parramatta, as a matter of fact, and during the first half, or the latter part of the first half, Normie was getting done for the ball, and as we all know, Norm, he was didn't like it at all, because he had to win the ball, and basically that was his job. And at half time I happened to be sitting in between Jack Blinkhorn and Norm Strong, having a bit of water or whatever, you're waiting for the talk. Norm just leant across me and said to Jack, he said, "You hook for the ball, I'll take care of everything." And I'm on the wing there, and the first scrum went down, and I heard an almighty scream. Billy Rayner at that stage was the hooker. He was helped off the field. We won the scrum and went on to win the game from there. But basically it taught me, I didn't know whether to jump over the fence and keep running and say, what's this all about? But basically that was the game. It was there, and it taught me a lot about. I knew what to do, what to expect during the course of the few seasons I played.
Just before I went to Wigan, there was another great South African winger, Tom van Vollenhoven, who'd gone over to St Helens a month before me. Because we left from Rhodesia, which, although it was in the same Currie Cup competition, was way up north of where Dr Craven and his fellows were running the show, we never had any repercussions at all, or I never heard of any. But Colin Greenwood, who was a good friend of mine who subsequently joined me in Norths, when he turned to go to Wakefield Trinity, he had Andy's blazer back after one test against the Irishman. And that was the sort of thing that was being applied to anyone who was nasty enough to go and play for professional rugby league.
I started my football in Tamworth in 1954. And the league up there was very strong. I would say very, very strong. The crowds are big. I started off junior football first, and then 58, 59 and 60, 61 and 62 I played in Tama first grade side, Tama City. We had 3 big years. We won the competition 58, 59 and 60. I played against the Englishmen in 62, then Harry McKinnon was up with the North Sydney side. They played the curtain opener. And after the game they offered me a contract to come to Sydney, which I was only too pleased to.
I had hitched for one game about 100 miles to have a game of rugby union, but then during the week someone came along and said, look, we'll pick you up if you come and play rugby league with us, and you can stay at the hotel for the weekend, which suited me fine. So that's how I turned to playing rugby league. And I only had 1 year at Gilgandra. And I think in that year I was picked to represent Western Division, and we won the Caltex Country Carnival. And I had a call actually from Frank Facer. Would I like to come down and play with St George? Which I naturally said yes. And I think I was, 19 at the time. And I didn't hear anything. Then I had a call about 2 weeks later from Frank saying, look, I'm sorry, we're not going to go ahead with the contract. And I said, that's fine. The next day, Eric Dawson, who was the secretary manager of the Leagues Club, turned up at the school with a contract and virtually said, look, would you like to come play with North Sydney? And I didn't. I thought, yeah, really, why not? So I signed on the spot, and then that's how I came to North Sydney. But I suppose it's a bit amusing. Years later, Harry McKinnon came to me and said, did you ever realise how you came to North Sydney and not St George? And I didn't realise that he knew about this. He said, Frank Facer and I were old mates. They were front rowers together. And he said, I actually conned Frank. And he said, one night at the New South Wales Leagues Club, Facer said to him, we've got this young centre from Gilgandra coming to play with us next year, called Cubis. And McKinnon, they were going to approach me anyway, they hadn't got round to it. And Harry McKinnon, who I had a lot of respect for with his intellect, and he was pretty quick-witted, he said, well, why would you want a 10-stone centre ostensibly to play with your back line? And Facer said, I heard he was about 13.5, 14 stone. And Harry McKinnon says, no, he's only about 10 stone. And Facer said, we don't want a centre like that. And Harry said, well, do you mind if we have a go for him? He said, no, go for your life, mate. So that was...
How much did you weigh?
I weighed about 13.7, 13.8 at the time.
I do recall my first grade game against North Sydney was in 1962, and it was at the cricket ground. I think basically it was about the first grade game I'd ever played at the cricket ground. And if they had had replacement rules in those days, I wouldn't have lasted very long, because the first time I got the ball I threw it wide and Dennis Cubis intercepted and scored. And I recall shortly after that, a similar event happened where I dropped the ball and Dennis Cubis scored again. As I said before, if we had replacements, the old sheep hook would have come out and I would have been off the field.
The first game with the North Sydney Bears was in the second grade game against St George at Cogger Oval.
What year was that?
That was in 1962. Quite an interesting game because I packed down with one of the great legends, or the name's a legend too as well, was the McKinnons. It was Dougie McKinnon. And I remember that game particularly because Doug got sent off for sticking up for me that particular game. What Doug did, we packed down the front row, and it was my first game introduction to the grade, and I was hit in the head by a punch from the second row, and Doug stood up for me and attacked the man that hit me. And ironically enough, he was sent off. But after the game, Harry asked Doug why did he stick up for Chicken Horton, and when he can fight himself. And he was going crook on Doug. No, it was quite an introduction to North Sydney Grade, and I was very proud to wear the North Sydney Bear jumper.
Well, in the middle of 1962, I had about 6 months of my English contract left, and I wanted to know what the club was going to do about signing on fee. At that stage, there was the bylaws of the game prohibited clubs from paying a second signing on fee. And that was subsequently broken wide open over in Australia when Dennis Tutty took the clubs to court and put himself out of the game for a year or two. I was in a similar position in mid-62 to late 62. And I went over with my solicitor to see Bill Fallowfield in Leeds, and he said, well, look, you're 30 years of age now. It's the bylaws of the game that are restricting this, not free trade. He said, if you take us to court, we'll put you out of the game for 2 years, and by the age 32, nobody will know of Fred Griffiths. So why don't you just go to Wigan, to North Sydney? Because the club had said, if you leave to go overseas, we'll give you a free clearance, and that's quite simply how I got the okay to go. Eric Ashton, our club captain at Wigan, was also the great British touring side club captain. Knew Harry McKinnon and North Sydney and all that went with the club. At that stage we were still at the old club, hadn't moved into the big new premises yet. And he spoke very well of the hospitality, the people, and the fact that the club hadn't done very well was not vital to him. The fact that there was an infrastructure there that could lead to bigger and better things. So he put his stamp of approval. And then I started negotiating seriously with the club. So we sold up and bailed out, and Margaret, my lovely English wife, and our little 9-month-old daughter came out in January of 1963 and arrived in Sydney in a nice summer morning, Sydney summer morning at Circular Quay, and what a welcome. It was great, eh?
That's right, yeah, 1963. I come to Sydney. I was 25 when I arrived in Sydney. I think I got in here, and my wife and myself, and we was at the motel, and just prior to coming to Sydney, I got bit by a spider. This is a bit of a story, and Fred Griffiths come to see me, and he took one look at me. He thought I had 2 heads, I think. That day I blew up with these tablets I'd taken, and just one of those things.
And what did Fred say?
Fred got the shock of his life. I thought, who's this bloke here? When I was thinking about coming out to North, I had a couple of letters which had a lot of bearing on my decision. One of them was from Harry McKinnon, who listed some of the players that were still at the club, and he felt it could be the nucleus to what we needed to get going after a couple of bad seasons. And he listed players like Carlson, who I knew because I'd played against Brian in the 59 touring side, Kenny Irvine, Lenny Dyatt, Ray Love. A lot of the names didn't mean a thing to me, but at least he assured me that there was a nucleus of some good players. Came out to, got to the club about 2 weeks before the first trial game, which wasn't a real good build-up time to get things established. And Brian didn't show up to the first 3 trial games, and we had a trial on the Saturday afternoon out at Henson Park. And Carlo had turned up and put his gear on just before the kick-off and joined in the trial game. And after the trial game I said, could we have a talk, Brian? He said, yeah, listen, I know where you're coming from. I appreciate that as coach, I need to train with you. But he said, I'm trying to get my business established in Newcastle. I don't want to come down to North Sydney, and I keep telling the club this. So I said, well, he said, I know where you're coming from. There's no problem with you and I. But I said, well, okay, well, where do we go from here? He said, I'll sort it out with the committee. Monday morning's paper, I read that Carlson had said if he comes to North, he's got to play fullback. Well, that made them make the decision, and they released him to go to the Newcastle team, which was home for him, you know. So no, there was never any aggravation. Carlo knew what the story was, and it sorted itself out.
Brian Carlson, well, Brian had that ability to set up a try and talk to players and organise players. It's very similar to Fred Griffiths.
Subsequent to Harry McKinnon's writing to me, we'd acquired the talents of Billy Wilson. That was a major acquisition as far as I was concerned, because he put a bit of starch into our pack of forwards which hadn't been there, and I always enjoyed Billy's support, so I valued that signing very much.
Billy Wilson, as someone to play against, you respected him tremendously, and it was great to have him on your side. He was as tough as nails, didn't know when to stop, and led by example.
Billy came to St George, and people will tell you that he was over the hill at St George. He certainly played some wonderful football here. He's Captain Australia from here at the ripe old age of 38. And anyone that can do that has to be a very good player.
Fred Griffiths as a coach, I think it must be very difficult for a player to be also a coach. It would be difficult enough being a coach, but I think to be a player coach must be extremely hard, because not only do they have to say what they want to happen, but they also have to do. Therefore, they are under probably they're under unconscious spotlight from their co-players. They're being, I suppose, assessed for their coaching input, but they're also being looked at as a contemporary, as a player. And so that was a difficult call for Fred. I think he did both jobs very well, extremely well. He wasn't at his most athletic period of his playing career, so, and you couldn't expect that, because otherwise he wouldn't have had the experience to be a coach. But he was a good communicator. He set a good example, both on and off the field. He was a good family man. He's a clean living guy. So you automatically respected him as a man. There was nothing in his personal behaviour or demeanour that you didn't respect. As a player, he was also an excellent player. He was so inspirational, he could kick goals from anywhere. It was marvellous. Sometimes the only criticism, and this is a criticism, he could tackle when he wanted to. I mean, one of the best tackles I've ever seen was when he absolutely flattened Elton Rasmussen coming down the sideline against St George at Redfern Oval in probably his first or second game with North Sydney. I think Elton Rasmussen ended up about 10 or 12 yards over the sideline, and we all wondered what we had.
Yeah, well, it was, we did, well, I think we missed out the semi-finals by 1 point, actually. It was quite a good effort, given that, where we'd come from, and we didn't do any huge signing ons, so I was quite pleased with the way it finished up. The last couple of games the draw was such that we played against teams who had semi-final experience, and that just proved, told in the final analysis. Yeah, unfortunately these things live with you all your life and haunt you all your life, but they just had a very strong all-round side, and once they got their tails up and Rasmussen and Provan started running off the rucks and Langland's chiming in at fullback, they were just too good for us, I was sorry we finished the way we did, because we'd had a few good games during the year, and it was just I was just disappointed for the club and the spectators who had high hopes that we ended up in a heap like that, but that's the way it goes, unfortunately.
I actually played a lot of second grade side in the first year I come to Sydney. I suppose that must be a learning role. Players like Dougie McKinnon, that's Harry's, one of Harry's boys. He was a really big help for me, and Ray Love, the halfback, they more or less got me going. And after the first year in Sydney, that was it. I went straight to first grade and played there ever since.
We were on the end of a fair sort of a flogging from South, which was par for the course in those days. And right at the very finish of the game, I threw a pass out to one of our backs. And a player called Greg Christensen from South Sydney intercepted the pass. I think he was playing 5/8, and he intercepted the pass and ran about 50 or 60 metres and put it down under the black dot. I felt about 2 inches tall, and to make it worse, some bloke out in the fence yelled out, "You great log McKinnon, you should be in Z grade." So I think mainly out of frustration. I'm sure I wouldn't do it if it happened now, and I'm not particularly proud of what I did. But I raced over and clocked him, and as that was happening, somebody gave me a bit of lip up on the bank up on the hill, so I jumped over the fence and had a go at him as well. So, but it all sort of petered out to nothing. I think Acker Forbes carveted me during the week, and we managed to sort of smooth it over. And I met the chap that I jobbed. As it turned out, I met a friend of his a few years later, and I said, well, whatever you do, the first thing you do when you tell him he's got apologise for me. I said, I'm thoroughly ashamed of what I did.
1964 season certainly started off with us acquiring Lloydie Weir's signature from Queensland. Rossi Warner had a year in Sydney football then and was ready to take over his place as the first grade hooker. And we acquired the services of Colin Greenwood. Colin had been out here with the Springbok Rugby League team, or South African Rugby League team, and he'd seen what the deal was, and his contract expired at Wakefield, and he joined us for 1964. And with those things falling into place, I mean, there were three real good acquisitions, you know, and it made the difference. We made the semi-finals.
As I make it, there's about 8 minutes to go in this game, and it's going to call for something pretty dynamic from the Newtown side to pull back this deficit. Newtown in possession, the ball goes to Brown, their blindside winger comes in, ball goes to Keys, to Hills, the fullback, who came in to make the extra man, but he was unable to get his pass away to Gary Torrens. Oh, and North Sydney has stolen the ball from him. Dyatt has the ball to Gudgeon, to O'Brien, and a fine run by Sladden up the far wing. Lloyd, where I would feel if I were in Fred Griffith's shoes at the moment as the captain coach of this North Sydney side, that he'd be saying to his lads, steady lads now, there's only 8 minutes to go, we're leading 13-4, they've got to score twice, so just play steady football, we'll move it if we can, if we can't, nothing silly. North Sydney in possession in their own side of halfway. I get the impression that they're not particularly worried at this stage about moving the ball to any great degree. They've got their big strong pack of forwards running and sickening this Newtown pack of forwards as they move in to tackle them. It's been a battle of big men today. There hasn't been a lot of spectacular football, but there's been some very, very solid impacts, as you just saw then with Graham Wilson and Gudgeon. Oakley's got the ball, the white headgear running, steps inside, gets the ball to Hatton. Hatton has tackled midfield. North Sydney in possession just inside their own 25, and Ross Warner, their hooker, is attempting to run the ball out, but he's been held quite successfully. Lee Kane, the North Sydney second rower, running the ball away from near the sideline here. Don Doak, his partner in the second row. Well tackled though by Quinn and Jeffries. Dawson, who goes to dummy half quite often in this North Sydney side, gets the ball away to Weir, who makes a good run of 15 yards.
I would say, without any fear, the best game of football that I played in all my time with North Sydney, or one of the top three games, was the semi-final against Balmain.
They're probably one of the hardest sides you'd ever meet, like Balmain. They just seem to have that toughness about them, and they had a good pack. Peter Provan and Boland and players like that, they were very hard.
They had the ball, the unlimited tackle, for virtually 65 to 70 minutes of that game. Never made a mistake. And we tried everything, but they never made a mistake and made it such an enjoyable game because they were perfection personified, and then our defence was faultless.
We had a fantastic forward side that year. Like you had Billy Wilson and Lloydie Weir, Johnny Gudgeon, Donnie Doak.
And I'll never forget it. It would have been about 3 minutes to go. Freddie Griffiths hiked the ball down the field, went over Barnes' head. Kenny Irvine flying down. We were under the post. Yeah, we were home. The ball landed on its end and must have bounced back 20 feet into into Keith Barnes' arm, you know, and a finger. But that was one of the most enjoyable games I played because we had to work and you had to do the job that you were out there for, you know.
Well, Colin Greenwood was a player and a man that I respected immensely. We spent a fair bit of time with him off the field because his interests were similar to mine. His work was at Arnott's Biscuits was very interesting. He had a production engineering background, and you know, we had lots of interests. So, but as a footballer, I think he's probably one of the most dedicated footballers that I've ever known.
Col Green, pound for pound, was probably one of the hardest and toughest footballers I've ever seen in my life. He was a true professional, a great sportsman, and man, he could tackle and he could play football.
The best way I could describe Ross Warner, if I had to pick a football team, he would be the first person I'd pick, without fear of contradiction from anywhere, as a footballer and as a person.
No, we had a couple of 3 years, I think, in fact, without losing a game at North Sydney.
Kenny Irvine, what do you say? You know, that has to be, you know, I couldn't pick one footballer. I've got to pick a dozen footballers because, you know, I wouldn't like to say them now, but Kenny Irvine, you know, all the accolades, whatever's been said about Kenny, all I can reiterate that everything that's been said about him is true.
Australia lead in 5 points to 3 and very much in the ball possession. This is a chance. Irvine's into the corner. Irvine must be in round the back of the post. He must be for the second try, and Irvine's in. A great try. Easy for Australia and Irvine. And Johnny Raper sidestepping. And Irvine must go. Irvine must go. It's a debacle. Irvine must go. Irvine must go. An up and under. And the crowd are going to have a shout. Whoa, get in, boys. Up you go. Oh, they're going to score. This fellow will score. Irvine, nobody will catch him. Manchester November, Andy Caprisos couldn't catch this fella. He's in.
Ken was a local junior, which was a bonus for the club, and the pace that he had, combined with everything else that he got in rugby league in relation to his defence and positional play, marked him as probably one of the best wingers in the world.
Summons is too nippy for Sayer. He cross-kicks. Boston goes for the ball. So does Brown. Irvine gets it and time's over for a spectacular try. The crowd is elated and thinks this must be Australia's day. Walsh gathers a loose ball to send Summons away. And there goes Gasnier after taking a difficult pass on his fingertips. Gasnier invades Britain's 25, giving Irvine a short run to the line to score.
There's a lot of wingers been and gone, but Ken had that natural ability. He was my hero, Ken. He could score a try at the drop of a hat. He'd be ringed by 5 players with 20 metres to go to the line, and he'd beat those players and score. Or if he was 70 yards from the line, he had that ability to slow a bloke up with a swerve and run around him and have the pace to go on with it. And Ken was that sort of a player that he had no peer. I don't think he's had a peer, and he never will have.
Chatfield on the run. Look at the speed of the second row forward. Up to Irvine. Irvine almost away. He's away. He's scored. He'll put the ball right into the post.
With surprising speed, he clears the ruck before passing to Irvine. Now watch as Irvine eludes the defence. Firstly, he steps inside Batty, wrong-footing the Manly fullback. Next, he breaches the gap between Ward and Pounder and accelerates. Finally, Pounder's desperate dive is all in vain, and Irvine completes another good piece of football by grounding the ball for an easy conversion.
And he was the leading try scorer in practically nearly every season.
Ken Irvine, a magnificent winger, speed personified, most probably the fastest footballer that's ever played the game in Australia. Beautiful hands, great swerve, the anticipation was spot on and would make his mark in any era of rugby league.
The Kangaroos use the open side. Smith to Gleeson, on to Beatson, who crashes through Buckley and dispatches a perfect pass to Irvine, who goes over. It's Irvine's 10th try in Anglo-Australian tests, creating a record he previously shared with Reg Gasnier and Britain's Billy Boston. Australia lead 3-2. Irvine is playing his 9th consecutive test against Britain, one more than Gasnier, but the same number Boston played against Australia.
Well, I must admit that that particular try gave me one of my greatest thrills in Test football. It took my tally to 10, which was the greatest number by any player in Anglo-Australian Tests, taking me one ahead of, or two ahead of Gaz at that stage. Reg and I went into the game, him on 8 and myself on 9, battling between ourselves, and it was an enormous thrill. It put us in front early in the game. It gave me the record, as I said, but I must admit that it was a great overhead pass by Artie Beetson that helped me get that try.
The Kangaroos burst through, Thornett sending to Wittenberg, who's held by Flanagan, but slips the ball to Johns on the burst. Across to Irvine, who fails to take cleanly but recovers to go in for a try. The British players dispute the referee's ruling of a rebound, claiming a knock-on. Bishop in particular being vigorous in his protests.
Well, certainly Tommy Bishop, by his antics, showed that what he thought there was definitely no try, but they complained bitterly to referee Cole Pearce, but I had no doubt in my mind that it was a try. There was no knock on at all. I was so close to Les Johns that I never had any chance in the world of getting my hands up to the ball. I had my hands down here, the ball hit my shoulder, went behind me. It made no connection whatsoever with my hands.
Waters as the world's best dummy half. Walsh sends to Gleeson, on to Thornett, then Johns, whose well-timed pass sends Irvine flying for the corner, and the winger's over for his 3rd try. The second time he's accomplished defeat in Test against Britain.
Well, certainly things were looking great, and I was very, very pleased. I mean, if you can score a try in a Test, you're thrilled to pieces. If you can score 2, well, you're more than excited. But to score 3, well, it was a beauty, and I certainly accepted them, and while I was able to go across the try line, the Australian tally was going up. But once again, it was a great pass this time by Les Johns that enabled me to, give me the opportunity to get across from the 3rd try.
Ken Irvine was a guy who I played all my representative football with. Like, we played for New South Wales together and Sydney City together and Australia together, and we toured together. We had 3 Kangaroo tours together, and well, what can I say? Kenny Irvine was a great player. He was a great winger and of all the time I've watched him play and played with him, I can't ever recall Kenny Irvine dropping a ball. I think he had the best hands and speed to burn, but I can't ever remember the man putting the ball on the ground once.
Well, I'd seen Ken play in England. I knew how fast he was, and I came out to Sydney, and I went out to Redfern with Eric Dawson, and they were running the gifts, the stall gifts and all these sprinters, and there were so many sprinters in rugby teams in Australia. I thought, gee, how the hell am I ever going to get near these guys, But Kenny's speed was incredible, and his handling skill. A lot of fast runners aren't always good handlers, but Kenny's skills all round were excellent, and we always tried to get the ball to Ken and get him away for a try, and I was delighted with his effort,
Loose play around halfway ends when Diamond gathers the ball and shoots ahead. Grabbed from behind by Haddad, Diamond kicks almost to the British line. Irvine streaks past Round to gain possession and score in the corner. He slips under Boston's attempted high tackle. Carson has the ball. Irvine gets the pass, which Englishman protested was forward and touches down. The crowd is wildly excited over Australia's 11th hour chance of victory and settles down to an anxious wait as Summons directs Irvine to take the all-important goal kick from near touch.
Kenny placed the ball, and as he stepped back, Darcy Lawler said to him, he said, "Hey, Kenny," he said, "you're not going to kick the ball over the uprights like that. Just turn a little bit to the left."
Tension increases as Irvine readjusts the ball. Only 2 minutes remain. Now he's ready. In he comes. Spectators behind
I know, because myself, I was in the stand and I kept yelling, why don't you pass it to him? Pass him the ball. Because, I mean, every time he got the ball, he scored.
He wasn't as easy to play with as a centre as a lot of people believe, because he wasn't a big man and he stood quite shallow. And he used to beat his opposition by often pulling them up and darting around like a rabbit. So often the public would often think you're not getting the ball to Irvine. But the reason was a lot of the time that Kenny stood rather flat. And when you had your defence coming onto you, you couldn't always get the ball away. Whereas if you're playing with someone like Johnny King, who was bigger, he's in representative, he'd stay right back at 45 degrees. And you could turn your hip into the opposing player and get the ball away. You couldn't always get it away to Ken like that. But Ken wasn't a big man, so he didn't have the style of running onto the ball. He would prefer to get it quite flat.
The reason we left Merlin Street was because the expressway and all that was going through, and they had to relocate to some area. And the people in charge at the time looked around the area quite well, and they finished up with the Abbott Street property. It was an important thing. It was a movement of society, I would say, that needed that club life was going to be a part of everybody's life in the future, and our people were pretty quick to realise that, and they established the club and made a good job of it. And the people today should really appreciate what those people done in the early days of the North Sydney Club, to the extent that they knew that football was going to become more professional, and they had to get the club going and get it going properly. And to that respect, you've got to look back on the Harry McKinnons, the Ackerfords, the Darcy Duffys, the Danny Gormans, and all those sort of people that done all that. And Frank Hazel, he doesn't get mentioned a great lot, but he was our treasurer at the time, and he was a great sort of a guy. So all those people put a lot of time and effort into North Sydney Club because they loved the club.
So anyhow, we left the bank in New South Wales, which we had to, and we went to the commercial bank. Somebody knew the bank manager down there, and thanks to the commercial bank, they said if we get some security, like that, we'll lend you the money. So I said, we had a meeting like that, and we had a meeting with the bank manager, and said to the bank manager, what do you want? He said, do you own your own home? And I said, yes. He said, would you mortgage it? I said, for this club, yes. So he said to Frank Hayes, do you own yours? He said, yes. He said, would you do the same as Hacker? He said, yes. So he went to McKinnon and he said to him, now what about you, Harry? He said, well, as long as nobody tells Laurie, he said, I'll mortgage it with Hacker. So anyhow, between the three of us, like that, we mortgaged our homes, and from that day onwards, just have a look at it.
I certainly remember that a lot of people were wondering where they got the money from to build the new club, because it was quite a big project. But it got up and running and started to make money fairly soon, so that everything worked out okay.
1965 season was one I look back with a lot of satisfaction, actually. We played some good rugby, played quite a few matches of the day at the cricket ground, which was the in thing at that stage. And by and large, we end up having a good season and finishing second to St George on the competition ladder.
It's a North Sydney ball. Simmons gets the ball to Dead. Dead kicks deep into Western Suburbs territory. Irvine is chasing up for it, but Barsley comes forward. There's a try. There's a try to Irvine. Through the big dummy then and straightened, but was well tackled by Gudgeon, the North Sydney lock forward. Meany running into Wilson. Charging ahead, makes the gain of 2 or 3 yards, takes play into the North 25. Pat Thomas to Bernanke. To Bardsley. Bardsley gets his pass on, and there we've got Pickett in possession. Pickett straightening, gets his pass out to Thornton. Thornton's running well for the line, and I believe it's a try. But there were several North Sydney players offside. Mr. Holman ruled, and the leaving kick has not found touch. Goes straight to Griffiths, who's running the play back upfield. Throws the dummy, gets it back inside to Warner, North's hooker, and play about 3 yards from Western Suburbs 25. Simmons gets his pass to Dyatt. Dyatt flicks back inside to Gudgeon. Gudgeon going strongly, charging upfield, gets his pass to Slack. to Barnsley, who comes in to make the extra man. The ball was dropped. It's picked up by Cubis. Cubis has got Irvine outside him. Irvine gives it back into Sladden. Sladden's going for the line. The tackle about 4 yards short of the line, and was he ready once again to get the try. They're only a yard or so short of the line now. Simmons very close to scoring for North Sydney. As the ball then flicked back, Irvine running across field, gives it to Cubis. Cubis gets it on to Olsen, and Olsen goes in for a good try for North Sydney.
I think they were running second to St George nearly all year, and I'd come back through injury through the lower grades again. I tore my Achilles at the start of the season. I was out most 8 weeks, I think, and I was in reserve grade for most of that year, and then towards the end of that year, I think they recognised they needed a bit of speed again that year around the scrum base, and I was elevated up there. And they were just a good side, Norse, and they were playing well. They were beating most sides.
This must be his idea, because his players that he turns back inside here frequently run into a wall of players, but I'm sure his idea is to keep containing the North Sydney forwards in a bunch, so that when he does fire the ball out along his line, they'll be... the cover defence won't be so thick out there. And here's Cowie bursting into the clear for Newtown, but tackled just short of the North Sydney 25. Quinn. She's passed on to Graney, midway between their own 25 and halfway in the centre of the field. There's Jeffries going to dummy half, gives it to Quinn. Quinn to Nobbs, Nobbs to Olive. Olive to Cuneo. Cuneo's bursting into the clear, running well, takes play back to the halfway line, gets his pass on to Moore. Moore's going up the middle of the field, gets it to Keys, but Keys can't handle it, and the ball has been taken for the first time for some minutes to an ironic cheer from the crowd by North Sydney. Gudgeon in possession at the moment, and he's, I believe, no, he lost the ball, but North have regained it. There's Warner running across, Simmons straightening, trying to clear the ball out from this danger area. They're about 3 yards outside the North Sydney 25. Warner to Wilson. Wilson gets to his feet. To Warner. To Weir. Weir loses the ball on the tackle. It's fallen on by a Newtown player. This will be a vital goal for North should Griffiths manage to kick it. You can see the halfway line there. A carry of about 53 yards, gets the ball high in the air. It's a beautiful looking kick, and it's there. It's there. My word, what an acquisition this fellow is to the North Sydney side. The score's once again level at 9-all. Simmons, their little half, trying to scurry away up the blind, but he's tackled by his opposite number. North's moving the ball. Dyatt to Cubis, Cubis to Irvine, who came in to make the extra man, gets it on to Greenwood. Greenwood is tackled well by Graney, the Newtown 5'8". The referee quite rightly allowing play to continue there. One of the Newtown players trying to concede a penalty, I thought. Here's Cubis running very strongly and loses the ball in the tackle. Picked up by Nobbs, the Newtown halfback, who's beaten 3 men. And a good run from this little man, who's having a very fine game for his team today. Quinn gets his pass on to Cuneo. Play situated midfield, just outside the Newtown 25. Quinn on to Cowie, number 45 for Newtown, who loses the ball on the tackle. It's stolen by Dyatt. And Dyatt is tackled by Quinn, and taking a long while to get off him there. North Sydney now. Doak in possession at the moment, having a tussle with Bruce Olive. Play about 3 yards outside the Newtown 25. Here's Big Lloyd Weir. Big Gudgeon charging ahead, number 8, but he's tackled by Les Boyle, the Newtown lock forward, number 8, who's having a very good game for his side as well. Billy Wilson runs straight into Quinn's game. Griffith's kick is successful, and we've got a tied score once again. 11 points all. 1 try and 4 goals each. They're leading Western Suburbs at Brookvale by 13 points to 4, and I'm not sure of the exact score from the St George Canterbury game. I think it's 38 to 2. Yes, 38 points to 2 in St George's favour. Play situated about 3 yards inside North Sydney's half, with the scores at 11 all even. Balmain are leading South 10-7 at the SCG. North Sydney still in possession, but they look a tired team to me. Mind you, the Newtown defence has been pretty solid all day. They're moving up quickly and they're knocking their opponents over, but I am a little disappointed in North Sydney's form, particularly in the forwards in this match. They don't appear to be running with a tremendous amount of vigour. Gets his pass on to Greenwood, who took play to about 10 yards from the Newtown 25. This is the first time that North have looked dangerous for some time. Moving the ball along their line. Griffiths comes in to make the extra man, gets it to Cubis. Cubis gets it onto Gudgeon. Gudgeon onto Irvine. Irvine trying to beat Lanigan, but can't do so. But in the tackle, he throws Lanigan right over his shoulder. Gudgeon to Simmons. Simmons sidestepping. Play about 5 yards from the Newtown 25 in the middle of the field. And the scores are 11 all. Weir to Wilson, to Griffiths up to make the extra man. Greenwood. Greenwood is coming on the burst and just trying to get his pass away, was knocked over. Griffiths up again. He's living in the back line for his side this second half. You can see Graney coming up very quickly in defence then to knock over his North Sydney opponent. Big Weir running strongly. Gets his pass on to Griffiths, who's backing up well. And play for the first time, I believe, this half in the Newtown 25. Lee Wilson in possession at the moment. Then Dyer flicks the ball back inside to Gudgeon. Gudgeon goes straight and hard, tackled about 20 yards out from the Newtown line. North's going well now, starting to plunge ahead. Their forwards making progress against this Newtown defence. Griffiths up again to make the extra man. The Cubis.
Unfortunately, after that, it just went downhill because we met St George in the major semi-final, and some of us didn't play as well as we could do, and that's putting it politely, and myself included. And once they got on top, a team like St George would just run you ragged, and that's what they did.
It wasn't good playing halfback that day. It was our big forwards. They were a big pack. I think we were the biggest in Sydney, I think, the team, but our big fellows didn't seem to cover the middle too well, and there was a lot of gaps. A lot of players were coming through and playing halfback, being a cover tackler, and playing before your forwards, before you covered behind your backs. It was a bit of a nightmare that day, but we just didn't have it that day. And St George, you had players like Reg Gasnier, Billy Smith, Langlands, Proven, Huddart was playing, Lumsden, of course, the wingers, Johnny King, Johnny Raper. I mean, they were a pretty hot side, St George, and we had a bad day, I think.
I was really disappointed because we deserved better than that, but that just wasn't to be, and just approached the lads after the game and asked them to keep their chins up, and it was on again next week, and that they'd let themselves down, so we had to do something about it next week. And which was the final match against South Sydney, who were the young side who were going to come up and challenge St George. And I didn't play. I shouldn't have, in fact, played against St George. I was having leg problems then. And they rose to the occasion, and Mickey Meyer had a big game at fullback, and Kenny did the goal kicking, and they lost to South Sydney. But it was a magnificent effort, and given the week before, Billy Wilson really got them lifting their game and played a good effort, put in a good effort.
Wilson was a warhorse. I think he was suffering from a head wound, as normal, Captain Blood. If we didn't go through a match when Billy got a cut head, it wouldn't be a normal match for Billy. And the younger South Sydney forwards, very strong, very fit, like Sattler, Coots, McCarthy's. A lot younger than Billy. Billy was 33 38, I think, at that stage. And he led by example, and it inspired me to sort of keep going.
But, we can't let this happen again, and it's against South, and they were a very good side also, so I won't take it away from them. We hit the front, we held them, they got back in.
I got a bad head-high injury in that match. Might have been when Mickey Marr scored the try, actually. I think the ball went to me and I put it back to him on the inside and he went over and scored. And I was hitting that tackle, and I can't remember much, after that, but I remember playing the game. But I could come in from the side, I was hit in the side of the head, which broke my teeth, back teeth, and I was young and tough and I didn't want them to show them that I'd been hurt. And I got up there and there was 3 rather rough characters from South Sydney that had a reputation for fixing up people, and was one of them. But I played the game out. I can't remember the game, but I got 1 point in the Sydney Morning Herald points that game, so I must have gone all right.
We had a disallowed try, Eric Sladen over in the corner in front of the member stand, which we thought was a bit dicey, but in the first half, I still remember it, we got penalised for being offside on the 25 in front of the sticks. The play was out on the sideline, but the penalty was awarded in front of the sticks. And Eric Sims was the goal kicker, and he never missed many.
Well, following that head-high tackle that I got there at the cricket ground, I couldn't remember what was much gone there, but I was all right after the game, virtually. During that week I was acting a bit strange, a couple of training things, I did some funny things. I think I had a bit of a drinking session and had a car accident as well, and that didn't do me any good. And the next weekend we went away on an end-of-season tour, and while we were up there we played Bundaberg, and we went to Queensland, North Queensland. We played Bundaberg in a match, and the country boys did the same thing, fix up the bluey, and I got a bad head high there as well. And that didn't do me much good, but I didn't think I was going too bad. And then we went to Cairns, of course. We played Cairns a couple of days later, and I got kicked in the head at Cairns. I got 6 stitches in the back of my head, and of course I wouldn't go to the hospital, and there's nothing wrong with me, and they had to drag me up. There was the concussion coming out from Sydney one mainly. And this is what the doctor said after the injury. There was I was suffering from delayed concussion from the first hit in Sydney. And of course this was all coming out on the trip, and I wasn't recognising it. Because I was a young fella, never been on an aircraft before, wanted to go on a trip. Knew I wasn't right, but I went on the trip. And of course, from what we can remember, piece together, I missed the plane at Mackay coming back, and I tried to get back to Sydney by myself, and as the record goes, I never got back here, and that's it. I had the injury, had the accident on trying to get back to Sydney. I was 5.5 months in hospital to start with, and then I continued the drugs after that to keep, I didn't know I was being underdone with the drugs. They keep you unaware of how badly you're injured, I'm sure, and things. But when I stopped taking that, I had a big come down to earth that it wasn't real good. But sport, I got back into sport pretty straight away, wheelchair sport, with basketball, and then I did javelin, shot put, discus, I did everything, and then I learned I could swim. And I finished up in the state side and broke the New South Wales Australian records and made the Olympic side straight away, so I was pretty happy with that. The Olympics were in Israel in 1968 for the wheelchair Olympics, so they'll call the Paralympics then actually, and before they've renamed them now that. But they were only for wheelchairs then. They weren't for all sorts of injuries. They weren't for all disabled people, only wheelchairs. And we had ours in Israel because Mexico was too high for the altitude was too high for quadriplegics to compete. So Israel said we'll have them there. And I was in the side as a swimmer and a basketballer, and I managed to win a silver in Israel, which is one of my prized possessions for the breaststroke. Wasn't good enough for the goal, but I just got beat by a touch.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. In hindsight, 66 was the one that was just too long. I was battling with a bad leg at the end of the 65 season, and I'd committed myself to a contract, and I maybe should have had some old wise man talk to me and chew my ear and say, look lad, you've had enough now, why don't you pull out and let somebody else take over? Because it just went from bad to worse, and I wasn't enjoying my footy. I was playing pretty ornery actually, and yes, I should not have played the last season that I did play.
Griffiths, the dummy half, has come right up into the backs. Across to O'Brien. This time finds Ambrum. Ambrum looking for Irvine's wing. Irvine coming inside, gets the pass. He's going across field. He might get the break, but no, the St George cover defence a little bit too good as King was watching him with an eagle eye and dragged him down about 30 yards out from the St George line. Couldn't play it properly, and naturally enough, a penalty to North Sydney against St George wouldn't allow Irvine to play that one. Here's a chance for Fred Griffiths to put first points on the board for either side. We've had exactly 20 minutes play in the first half and no score, and no points on the board as he comes in. Lots of height again. This time the flags are up, and so first points on the board for North Sydney, and North lead 2-0 over St George. Only 20 yards out from the North Sydney line. St George, as it comes out to Raper and then to Clay. Clay clapping on the pace. A good pass there to Huddard. He's caught round the arms. Can't get a pass clear as Greenwood dived on him. Only 10 yards out from the North Sydney line. Over to Smith this time. Smith looking for support. Almost got a pass away, and he did. The St George players are dragged down 5 yards now short of the North Sydney line. Darting around the scrum, but he's lost the ball. It'll be a North Sydney ball kicked through there, but the referee has blown his whistle. Little spot of bother for North Sydney.
My word, they were in bother then, but they were lucky to get out of it, and it was a good defence by North Sydney to keep them out, but St George looked very dangerous.
Raven putting his head down and barging. They've only made a couple of yards. It looks as though the St George forwards are the stronger on the day. Gudgeon again, standing wide and running wide and burst clear, looking for Irvine. Irvine comes inside, gets the pass. He's only got King to beat, puts his boot to the ball. He's held there by King. I don't think anyone caught onto that one. It goes into touch.
Fred suffered a few injuries. His play at fullback wasn't as good as what he would have liked. Now, his defence was, Fred would be the first one to put his hand up and say that his defence wasn't his forte. And there was a couple of alarming games. I think his confidence fell down, and that in turn affected his coaching. You know, because I can remember him at one particular training session. We'd get together and have a talk about the previous week's game. And Donnie Doak piped up to Fred and said, how can you criticise us when you stepped aside and let so-and-so score a try? And Fred, because the wisdom of Fred and the way he was, he looked at Donnie Doak, he said, who am I to stop a person scoring a try when 12 people in front of me couldn't tackle him?
1966, we went to North Sydney Oval, and they had a great record there. And we were an up-and-coming side, Newtown. We'd sort of had a changing of the guard ourselves in the forwards, and we had a few young guys coming through, but they were starting to hit the straps. And Bobby Keys and I were at the stage where we were gaining a reputation as being quality centres. That game in particular, I recall I couldn't get a parking spot anywhere near North Sydney Oval. And when I got there, I was so surprised. It was a ground record at the time. And North led early, and they were playing strong football. And then our coach, Dickie Pearl, who was in the centre, and he really pulled Keezy and I aside and said, now look, you guys, you're the ones that can do this for us. And fortunately for us that day, we went out there and it did happen for us. But it was a great game. It was just one of those games that the press even of the day even said that it was an excellent game. And North was so professional, and their performance was of a high standard. And it was one of those games that it could have went any way. It was just a few little things happened that went our way, and their record was broken. You know, I think it was something like a 4-year record, undefeated at North Sydney. But you couldn't say either side was superior. It was just a good even game where the scoreboard said that Newtown won at the end.
North Sydney hooker gets up and plays it to Stanton. Stanton's accelerated right through an opening, and he's going to score a walk-away try. Beautiful football from Frankie Stanton.
As I recall,
the North Sydney side, and I remember Fred Griffith, they had a fairly good run in those 2 previous years, whereas the Manly club had very good years in 64 and 65, but they brought Wally O'Connell back to coach in 66, and it also coincided with the arrival of the club of Bob Fulton. And there was a lot of young players assembled at that time for Manly, and so it was a beginning of a bit of a resurgence. In fact, Manly ended up playing, I think, in the 68 grand final. My recollection of Norths is not great from that period, other than you know, there was always that spice in the game, regardless of where each team was positioned on the ladder. There was always the local derby.
Yeah, well, I watched it from the sideline. Billy Wilson did a great job in leading them, and that's where it all happened in the boiler room, because Beetson had just been sent off for 3 weeks, and he came back in his first game, and Billy and them were taunting him in the front row, Billy and Rossi Warner, and he was up and down like a cage lion. He couldn't go the way he would like to go because he would have had another early shower. And I think while all that nonsense was going on in the boiler room, the backs played very well, actually. It was an excellent game of rugby.
Ingham on the blind. Ingham gets it back to Doak. Doak onto Wilson. Wilson running on the open side of the ruckers. Broken into the clearance, Billy Wilson. Carrying the ball, throws a loose pass out, but Ambram gathers it nicely. Ambram gets the pass onto his brother, John Ambram, and Ambram goes back to the 25. Gets a pass back inside to O'Brien. O'Brien gets it onto Russell, and Russell scores a magnificent try for the North Sydney side. This was superb football.
George Ambram, George would be one of the gentlest men you'd ever meet. I don't think I can remember George Ambram with anything but a smile on his face either on or off the field. That was a tragedy that he lost his life so early, because he just loved his football. And totally uncomplicated man, very, very gentle. He was everyone's favourite.
I sniffed around at a few country positions, postings, and I had George Comans, the solicitor, act on my behalf. And he put a couple of deals to me, and one of them I flew down to Griffith in the Riverina and joined the Griffith Waratahs. And it was 2 of the best years I could have wished to have, because I finished at North on a bit of a downer with my own physical condition, and met some tremendous kids and lovely people in the Waratahs at Griffith, and won the premiership and did a bit of this and that. And of course, nothing succeeds like a bit of success, does it? You know, and so no, I had 2 very happy years there.
And I think it became relatively boring. It was a fairly simple game to play. The coaching was hang on to possession, just keep working and grinding your way upfield, and if you kept possession, eventually you have to score. And it didn't allow for breakdown in play except through mistake. If someone had a mistake, then the other team would get possession. But I think the full tackle rule opened the game up and introduced the ability to spread possession.
And when you lose a man like Fred Griffiths, you're losing 12 to 14 points a game.
Now, Billy Wilson, as a footballer, as a man, tactician, everything good, but it's like a lot of footballers, try your hand at coaching is, as different as chalk and cheese.
As a coach, I would, it's not being unfair to Bill. Maybe his communication skill wasn't at the level of Cole Greenwood's and Billy and Freddie Griffiths or Roy Francis, but you could never doubt his sincerity.
Kid gets it out to Waper. Doyle. This is Green that has it now. Gets it on to Gardner. Gardner sticks to the front. It's going well. Taken from behind by Sladden. He's been around football for a long while. He's still got plenty of pace. There's Greaves slicing across field. Get it to Kidd. Kidd soon grabbed by Warner, but he's still got out of it. He's going on. Waper there backing up, has the ball. This is brought play down into North Sydney's 25. Palethorpe's the dummy half. Canterbury plays the ball and gets it across to Greaves. Greaves pops, gives it back to Brown, onto Hicks. A low one that was hard to take for Gardner.
Oh dear, an impossible pass went there to Barry Reynolds on the wing, but now it's back with Doyle. Doyle straightens up and on. North Sydney's 20 cuts through, gets down back to Greaves. Greaves sends a long one across, and it starts a run down the wing there by Hughes, but soon stopped. Kidd switches play and gets it over to Johns, and Johns gets it back then to Doyle, and Tailforth has a poor attempt at field goal. Gudgeon gathers, is now running the ball upfield as runs into a couple of Canterbury players. North Sydney player hurt over there, but Gudgeon gets up to play it. Warner sends it to Weir. O'Brien, Banks, looking around for support, turns it back inside. Keith Russell has it, loses the ball. Raper gathers it, passes it off the ground to Johns, quite legitimate. Johns turns a long one to Tailforth, and Johns gets it away to Gartner. Gartner's brought down around the head by Cole Greenwood. Marking him is Warner. Tailforth sends it across to Raper. Raper looks around, and a low one that was impossible for Hicks to gather. Now it's with Goldspink. Goldspink sends it across field to Cole Brown, the hooker, who's immediately dumped by Banks. Takes him high, and now it gets back to Warner after going through the hands of O'Brien. Banks comes into dummy half. Now to O'Brien, Marr, Gudgeon. Here's Cubis. Cubis is going hard. John's going across, he gets it back inside to Irvine. Irvine's marked first of all by Ron Raper and then by Clive Gartner. The fourth tackle's coming up. North Sydney's ball play right down to Canterbury territory. Now it goes across to O'Brien. Weir looks around. Now it's with Banks. Banks caught by the jumper. Hancock doesn't know what to do with it. Gets away to Schroeder. Now into Cubis again. Cubis is pulled down in no uncertain terms by Gartner, and so the fourth tackle and another scrum will go down. Schroeder pulled him down. Ross Kidd sends a long one to Hicks. Goldspink, not Goldspink, Tailforth rather. Back to Hughes, the replacement winger, who goes for a little kick inside, and Irvine's underneath it. Greaves is up there, and Greaves pulls him down and plays only about 6 or 7 yards out from the North Sydney try line. Tailforth tried to hook that ball and was regained immediately, as you saw, by Irvine. Irvine's wrestled down by Raper and Hicks. Ross Warner at dummy half. A high one, difficult to handle, but O'Brien did bring it down. It's Weir, gets it onto Sladden. Sladden has Russell outside him, and Russell's going hard, trying to get around Doyle. He tricks Doyle and is still going hard. Gets it away now to Sladden again. Nice work then by Russell. Sladden to get up and play this ball. Ross Warner at dummy half. Back to O'Brien, to Banks. Marr up with the three-quarters. Cubis gets it onto Ken Irvine, who's upended very quickly by Hughes. Into the hands of Russell. Russell runs straight into Goldspink. That's Warner, O'Brien, that's Gudgeon. Long one to Greenwood, who gets it on to Marr, who's broken through and gets it back to Banks. Banks back to Marr. Marr still going, gets to Irvine. Irvine shoots it back now to Sladden. Sladden couldn't get it away. It goes loose as he tries to. And it's Reynolds finally caught with the ball by Marr. Another Canterbury ball goes to Raper, who stood out of the scrum. And Raper is about a foot short. Would have taken a double movement to get over. Raper plays the ball to Tailforth, to Ryan, and Ryan goes the barge. Now they'll lift him back over because there's enough North Sydney players there to do it. He's about a half a yard short. Tailforth pointing out to his left. Now Hughes will play the ball back to Kidd. Now it's Raper who's doing a ton of work, as you can see. Greaves. Now it's with Tailforth. Tailforth, as he's on his back, gets it to Greaves. Greaves is on the attack here, and anything could happen. It's with Hicks. Hicks is going like a train, and he's over the line, but loses the ball. Is it a try? Did he ground it first? Yes, it's ruled that way, and so there's a try by Hicks, who was going with all the speed and momentum.
Bill was a very hard coach, plenty of training, plenty of drill, but we just didn't have that goal kick in there to kick us on. And that was only 1 year. What you can't do a great deal in 1 year.
I got to know Ross at that particular time when he was there, and I was in the lower grades, and he was someone I looked up to, and he helped me a lot, Ross. Actually, I owe a lot to Ross Warner as far as my career is concerned, because he advised me that if I wanted to get more experience was to go to a countryside and try to become
be a captain coach of a country team. He said, and that would bring experience out in you, so that I did. I went to Tamworth. I was only on loan from the North Sydney club. But anyway, I managed to play for 2 country sides. I played for country seconds and country first. That was in the 1967 side against City, in which that team won. They beat the City, and it was quite a good team. It was the year they had Father John Coots. It was in that side. But anyhow, getting on to North Sydney, I came back as a country first representative player, and I came down into the team to play for North Sydney Bears. I was signed up to play. Colin Greenwood was the coach, and I'd made it. I was in Sydney, and I'd made the first grade side as the board as the first grade player to play for North Sydney Bears. As I'd always followed North and followed the coaches of the great Fred Griffiths, Billy Wilson, and then, of course, Colin Greenwood, a great player and a great clubman. Colin was given the coach of the role as captain coach, and he was a great leader. And also, Colin was his first year at coach. Now, it's very hard. He needed the support of the players, and Colin Greenwood, I felt, was not given it as the opportunity to coach North Sydney. Like I meant to say, he was only given the 6 months to coach the side, and because he didn't meet with a lot of success, a new coach was brought in from England by the name of Roy Francis, and a few of the players weren't happy about it. That particular night, we were going to go on strike, and that was it. We were all behind Colin. And when we were over in Claude Fay's pub at the bar, it was unanimous that that was it. We were supporting Colin, irrespective of what the club thought. But Colin, the person that he is, he stepped forward. He said he appreciated it. He thanked what we were doing, what we wanted to do for him. But he said the best thing you could do is go out there, and while the interim coach when Roy Francis is coaching for those 6 weeks, he said, go out and win the football games for me.
My guest I've had to literally tear from the football field for this evening's guest spot. It's the North Sydney Rugby League coach, Roy Francis. Good evening, Roy.
Good evening, Noel.
Roy, your own background as a player and then as a coach, how did it all come about?
Well, I started at 16 and a half years of age in Wales, and were taken up north, as they call it back home, to play professional football in the north of England, because there's no professional football in the south of England. And I played 21 seasons with 4 clubs, then took over coaching in 1950, and I've been coaching ever since.
And how did you come to be connected then with North Sydney?
Well, last year when North Sydney were in the doldrums, Mr. Harry McKinnon, who is the president of North Sydney Club, decided to do something about it. Some people think it was rather drastic, but he brought me out from England for 6 weeks. There were 6 matches to play. We won 3 and lost 3, which really took us away from the wooden spoon. And then he invited me to take up a permanent position here, well, not a semi-permanent position, which is for 3 years. I have a 3-year contract, to see if I can pick North up from where they are, or help the North players to pick themselves up, rather.
Yeah. You have some good material in the North Sydney club.
Yes, there's some excellent material there. It's just a case of blending it into a powerful striking force and building within the players themselves the confidence that they must have if they're going to be held in equal reckoning with the top clubs in Sydney.
So Roy Francis came out for a 6-week stint with North Sydney Bears, and he was to be the next coach. In those 6 weeks, Roy made a very huge impression on not only the players, but also the whole district of the North Sydney club. And everyone was excited because the following year that we had a new coach that was going to probably take North Sydney to a premiership.
I felt that Roy Francis was a super salesman and could certainly promote his goal extremely well verbally. He was a good communicator. When he came, he took over the role almost of he was the leader, the charismatic leader, and people responded to him initially, because he was very refreshing. He was charming company, and I believe the players responded magnificently to him.
Roy, well, you've brought a team up here now. What's the idea?
Oh, it's very simple, actually. We are reaching the stage in Sydney where the final push for top 4 placings prior to the second round starting is on. We need 3 matches out of 4. We've played 1 and lost 1. We need the following 2 matches to remain in a position of some strength. So I decided to bring the boys away for a fortnight so that we could sort of live together, discuss the game, discuss our discrepancies, analyse our strengths and the opposition that we're going to meet.
And you've got some opposition to meet too?
Yes, we have indeed. We play... who do we play?
South.
We play South, that's right. I just thought I'd heard of them before. We play South this week, and then we play Balmain the week afterwards.
Well, that's something to think about.
1969, he went after he had the 6-week stint, come over and took control. It was different. It was like a breath of fresh air in one respect, because it was completely different to what the methods of coaching that we had in the previous years. Sort of Roy was sort of a little bit before his time, because basically he was the innovator of training 4 days a week and variation and a lot of different things, and then he started off on the right foot by calling us all together and saying that he's going to rely on the people that he had, i.e. the Irvines, the Chicken Nortons, the Leo Tuis, the Rossi Warners, these sort of people that were the heart and were the soul and heart of the side at that stage.
Roy Francis, probably the finest coach I've ever met. I think he's about 10 years in front of anybody.
Roy, you're a coach for the North Sydney side, and what are the basic things that a coach requires?
Oh, knowledge, football knowledge, dedication, honesty, and sincerity.
And then what would he require of the players?
Exactly the same. Exactly the same.
And how do you put them all together?
You mean in what order? Oh, then there must be a high percentage of ability, a high percentage of football knowledge. I think you must be dedicated to the game if you're going to play it well or coach it well. I think one must be honest with oneself, as a player must be honest with himself. And as far as integrity is concerned, I would hate to think that my players thought I lacked it, and I'm sure I don't think that they lack it either.
Graham Williams, halfback Roy Francis, was responsible for bringing Graham Williams out here. He came out from England, stepped off the plane and kissed the tarmac, the cement, and he said that's how happy he was to be in Australia to play.
Noel Kavanagh, affectionately called the General, if you had to go into the trenches, he would be the type of person you want to take with you.
Eric Pitt, a lovely fellow, Eric, and he had biggest feet that anyone had ever seen. He had about a size 18 foot, and to be able to buy a football boot for him was practically nearly impossible. But he was just one of those guys that you couldn't help but like, and he was played first grade, and he was a very, very competitive player and a great bloke, great clubman.
We knuckled down and we had a very, very good season. We picked ourselves up from 88, had a very good season. Finished on a real high note. We could have finished 5th, but we played Balmain and they beat us by a point over at Leichhardt. And it was about the first time that a person was ever on a crackerjack bonus to win a game of football, but it was a nothing game of football. But prestige-wise for Roy and the club, it would have been nice to finish just out of the 4 instead of number 7.
The referee for this match will be Keith Holman.
North Sydney and the Black Shorts on the left to kick off to start this match of the day against Manly Warringah. kicking straight up into the sun. Manly with the ball, Manly in the white shorts running from right to left. Today's match in charge of Keith Holman, former Australian Test halfback. North's in possession. That's 5'8" Williams, former halfback. Now with the fourth tackle coming up, North Sydney are winning Manly's half. And with the scrum, time to introduce our expert commentator, Trevor Allen.
Well, this afternoon, there's no doubt this should be a very close clash. I feel that the forward clash will be fairly even, could be interesting from the hookups position, but I feel that Manly will probably win this match because of the balance of stronger power, I feel, in the back line, particularly with centres Tennant and McDonald.
McDonald for Manly playing the ball about 5 yards outside his own 25. Ward. It's not Ward. Fulton, the Manly captain. Midway between the 25 and halfway in his own territory. The ball back to Batty, he'll kick. Going back to Booby, replacing his captain McMahon, who's not playing today. And a good run by the little fullback takes play back into Manly's half. But this time, Norths have the advantage because they have the ball. Almost through. And the first penalty of the match, that's against lock forward Cameron, second row forward Peters.
Yes, it appeared when the tackle was made that referee Keith Holman immediately spotted something, and it was quite obviously that something happened in the tackle, probably just a short little clip with the hand, I would say. Referee Holman, early in the match, quite obviously wants to put a stop to any rough play today.
Has plenty of distance and enough height, and that's over. The first points of the match. North Sydney 2, Manly 0. McDonald, the Tennant. Been good defensive play. Irvine almost away. Williams backing up. No support, and Irvine with an extra yard or two of pace could have gone in then for North Sydney. Fens to Irvine, trying to beat his man on the corner, into touch though, 5 yards short of the line, another scrum. Hamilton, almost through. Hannigan can't take it, now Irvine. Warner to Irvine again. Showing plenty of pace, Irvine, almost through the breaks. North still in the attack. McDonald back to Fens. Irvine to Norton. Fourth tackle coming up. Williams standing back for a shot at field goal. Here it goes. And 2 more points. North Sydney 4, Manly 0.
The penalty, of course, I don't know what really happened there, because it did certainly look as though he was indicating that there was someone punching from the North second row.
Batty's kick, plenty of distance and plenty of height. That's over. And North's lead now by 4 points to 2. Fulton back to Batty. There's a good break. Now on to Hannigan. Hannigan down the touchline. Irvine, too much pace for him. Going for the corner. It's getting very close. McDonald almost in, but into touch. 5 yards short of the North Sydney line. Looked like he almost could get the ball away, but held onto it. Weir, Banks, out to Ambram. Ambram and Goff. Goff's pretty fast. Ambram almost on the way, but into touch, as you can see, 5 yards inside Manly's half.
Good football by North Sydney. They're getting themselves out of trouble when they get possession down in their own 25. They're backing up and willing to let the ball flow and see if they can get it out to the wings and make a break.
Williams, a bad pass, but Tui well taken. Has Irvine outside. Irvine still gets the ball away. Booby. Fans, Williams, McDonald, Chatfield. Chatfield, a very fast second row going for the corner. Ambram. Ambram could go in. Ambram will score. Good lead-up play by Chatfield. A fine try to North Sydney. North leading now by 7 points to 2.
Now in action replay, here again is North Sydney's first try. The ball goes from Williams to McDonald to find Chatfield playing very wide. The powerful second rower beats tackles by Tennant and Ward before passing to Ambram, who goes through to score in the corner.
Back to Batty. And he's going to run. McDonald has plenty of room in which to move. Fans after him. Good tackle, Fans, right round the ankles. Peters 10 yards short of the North's 25. McDonald again. Goff going for the corner. He's in.
Well, that was certainly a great run by Goff. He was very determined down there. He didn't have a lot of room to move, but he managed to get Booby, who I thought made a rather poor attempt at tackling him, but at the pace Goff was going, Booby may have been just slightly in the wrong position.
Tackled by his opposite number, Fulton. Williams again. Banks has Tui there. Chatfield through again. Ambram on the wing. Ambram going for the corner. Might just do it again. He's over again. No, into touch.
Well, what a near thing that must have been.
In stop action, we see that Ambram has grounded the ball correctly in the in-goal area with the corner post still unbroken. However, it was several feet beforehand that Ambram crossed the touchline as indicated by the touch judge.
G. McTaggart, jumper 16, is on for Tennant.
10 yards short of the Manly 25. North's on the move. Weir with a new jumper. Had his old jumper torn in the first half. Bright new number 13 standing out. Norton trying to go through. Kavanagh getting the ball back. Weir again. Weir didn't let the ball go to Fans, and now Weir will have to play the ball about 10 yards short. Could there be a field goal? No. Norton again. Norton almost through the gap. The ball taken by Manly. Manly will have to play it and run it out. Now there's the replacement player, McTaggart, on the field for centre Tennant. Fulton outside his 25. Hamilton trying to straighten up. Centre Banks, number 4, the tackler. North with the ball now. Here's Ambram, back to Tui. North What's on the move? Kavanagh, Williams, Chatfield. Chatfield's through, trying to link up with Irvine. Irvine's going with him, a long pass. The winger going for the corner. Hannigan's got him. And that's 3 times that Chatfield has either set up or nearly set up a try for his wingers. Weir through the brick gap. Can't get the ball to Banks. Held onto it too long, and that was an opportunity gone begging.
The back line is very unruly, and they're not getting smooth, sweet passes out along it.
Well, that was the ball won by North Sydney, and you could see the interference. Forwards breaking from the wrong side of the scrum after twisting it. Thompson, the offender, and now a few words being said by Peters. It looks pretty good. That's 2 more points. North Sydney 9, Manly 5. Williams kicking for the touchline. Hannigan going back for it. Irvine coming through. Hannigan has it. And Irvine covering 2 men. Fairns. Now McTaggart. Fulton almost through. Is through. Has support. Ball out towards Cameron. Going for the line. Some of the best play of the match by Manly. Fairns, the halfback for North Sydney, in possession, midway between his 25 and the halfway. Kavanagh. McDonald to Toohey to Chatfield. Chatfield on the run. Look at the speed of the second row forward. Up to Irvine. Irvine almost away. He's away. He's scored. He'll put the ball right into the post.
In action replay, here's how Chatfield again sets up the try. Fairns will play the loose ball to Kavanagh, and it goes on to McDonald, Toohey, and then Chatfield. With surprising speed, he clears the ruck before passing to Irvine. Now watch as Irvine eludes the defence. Firstly, he steps inside Batty, wrong-footing the Manly fullback. Next, he breaches the gap between Ward and Pounder and accelerates. Finally, Pounder's desperate dive is all in vain, and Irvine completes another good piece of football by grounding the ball for an easy conversion.
That's over. Kavanagh, 3 goals from 7 attempts. Ward has Fulton outside. A good break by the halfback. Still going. Clever run by the halfback. Hannigan. Manly now in desperate trouble. Have to move the ball around. Hamilton. No, McDonald. That's Hamilton. Back to Fulton. Fulton could get very close here. He's got nippy footwork, but the defence holds. Hamilton, he'll try and go himself, but plenty of weight against him. And the scrum for the second row will be set 10 yards outside the North Sydney line.
All credit to North's defence. They've tightened it up a little bit there. They were in trouble, but they've tightened it up and have managed to keep the Manly attack at bay. Certainly doing a grand job. The pressure is now going to be placed on North Sydney.
North's ball, Fairns. Now Ambram. Each Ward that time. Through Batty's tackle on his way. Thompson's after him. How much pace has Ambram got? Hannigan's coming across, but Ambram will go in. Second try to winger Ambram. North Sydney further ahead, 17 points to 7. Ambram's try unconverted by Kavanagh. Fulton will kick off, and we've got only 1 or 2 minutes of play remaining. North still leading 17-7. Running the ball up towards the halfway of the 25. Chatfield again in the ruck, trying to go through it. North Sydney forwards have been playing well today, Trevor.
Yes, they've done a great job. They really have. I thought it'd be very even between the forwards, but they've been on top for most of the match.
Now the kick going back for it is Goff and also Batties. Goff it is with the ball. Coming up towards the defence, there's a lot of them there, taken by Banks, number 4, the aid of Tui. And there's the full-time siren going. North Sydney have won the match. North Sydney 17, Manly 7.
Until the latter part of the season, we're playing Penrith down at North Sydney Oval. We were streeting Penrith by a proverbial country mile, and I happened to come in, must have been about 10 minutes to go in the game. We're about 30 points ahead or something. It was an easy win. I chimed in from fullback in between the centres, and one of the Penrith players hung out an arm, gave me a real good coat hanger, and I swung like a pendulum on the grandfather clock, and that was it, you know. So virtually that, as it turned out, was the sign to say, Mick, you can't go anymore.
Yeah, that opening match in against Canterbury at Belmore in 1970 is one that I remember quite well, because it stood out as an example. I believe that the referee was an example of a referee actually losing control and really the respect of the players. I had never heard a referee before making specific comments to players about themselves or their behaviour, and that just set a very, poor tone. And certainly we did consider going off, but it was anger, frustration, and we thought that I think there were 2 players sent off, Johnny McDonald and I'm not sure, Kenny Irvine, but both of those occasions we thought that it was more vindictive and a personal response rather than out of any breaking of any rules or. Yeah, it was a memorable match. We were all actually surprised that it got the publicity that it did. As far as we were concerned, when we were finished, it was finished, and then it all blew out of proportion.
Well, I'd signed on with North for 68, 69, 70. Now, at the end of 1970, North Sydney were in a spot of financial trouble, which didn't concern the players. But Roy Francis put Ken Irvine on transfer.
Yes, I know, because he had a falling out with Roy Francis. And he said he wouldn't play for North again. And I was really sad, yeah.
And he also put myself on transfer. One of the reasons he put myself on transfer was for the fact that North Sydney needed a distributor forward. I was a running forward. North had 2 running forwards up front. Merv Hicks was the man they were targeting. They wanted to swap. Ken McCaffrey at that particular time was in charge as the Chief Executive Officer, and he wanted to swap for myself to go to Canterbury and do a swap with Merv Hicks, which I was a bit upset about because my Bears was the club I wanted to stay with. But Roy Francis did say to me, look, you probably need a change. He spoke to me and gave me a lot of reasons why I should make a change. And he said to me that if you stay at North Sydney, as you can understand, we've got Jim Mills as a prop forward on one side. I'm after a ball distributing forward on the other side. So, if you go to another club, you're sure to hold a position. So, I was quite happy with that, but I wasn't going to be going to Canterbury where they were going to tell me to go to. So, I finished up going to St George.
It was a specialised organ. I was lucky. I had, like the first year's a good pack. I had Billy Wilson and Lloyd Weir, which were tremendous props and good second rowers. And then I had Merv Hicks and Jimmy Mills, two big mobile, and fantastic props, big men. But the thing in it is hooking. You should never take your eye off the ball and make sure your half-pin puts it in right, you know what I mean? Because if you haven't got the ball, you can't score tries. And if I didn't win the ball, well, you wouldn't be in the side, so you had to get that ball at all costs.
So Irvine had left. He'd gone to Manly, and let me tell you, it didn't matter where Chicken Norton went to, because that was not a problem with anybody, but to lose Ken Irvine, that was something. That was huge. I mean, so to North Sydney to lose their greatest player of all time, Ken Irvine, really set a rumble in the jungle. You know, Roy maybe was copping a lot of flack for that, but I don't know what was going on either at in the boardroom or, you know, whether how the financial system was, but I think Norse did get a good transfer fee for Ken Irvine. I think it was quite a lot of money at that particular time, even though they were being fair too. Norse weren't greedy of the transfer fee that they wanted for Irvine. But as time was going on, he was starting to cop maybe a little bit of flack because North Sydney hadn't won the premiership, which he'd promised them to do. It was this coach had come out from England and promised to take North on into the finals and the semi-finals, finals, and the premiership wasn't happening. And there we were, losing Ken Irvine, we're losing some other players. But once again, I just still believe that if North had left stability, take its class, if they left Francis there for another 3 to 4 years, well, I believe he would have got him a premiership. And but in the 70s, I'd gone to St George, so it was after about 6 weeks in the pre-season training that the next minute I know Roy Francis was going back to England.
I don't think he managed to continue with the promise that he initially showed. Overall, I would think in the end there was a feeling of he's human. He's not quite the guy that we all thought he was going to be. And I don't think he eventually drew out of the players a response that he initially managed to achieve.
For professional football in Australia, is it professional yet?
Not if you're talking in terms of full-time professionalism. I don't think that the approach to the game, either at the administrative level, legislative level, or playing level, is as professional as it is in England.
Do you think there's any way that we can become fully professional?
Oh, I think it's the same as everything else. If you have the desire to become fully professional, and you can be, I think there's ample scope here to do so. The weather is fine, the fellas are big, fine, strapping blokes, you know. There's no reason why it shouldn't.
Yes, certainly rugby league had a working class background, and that was the traditional background of rugby league, and that's fair enough, but I wouldn't say at all. There were plenty of people that I played with and against who were teachers, who had university education. I think the media concentrated on developing that image because it suited the media. I don't think, and the rough and tough concept of physical contact, that suited media image of rugby league. I don't think that was necessarily the case. There are plenty of instances that I could point out of rugby league players that you could put in any company, in any intellectual company would hold their own, with many players who I know who played rugby union who are flat out putting 4 or 5 sentences together.
Most certainly. I mean, it amazed me when I used to read in the paper about these easy boots at North Sydney and all the other media rubbish, and I can tell you that anybody that played against North Sydney never ever had that opinion.
So the 60s were a great time, rock and roll, you know. Football was great, the rugby league was great. It was a good era to grow up in. Jobs were good. I had a good job working at the Daily Telegraph, remember that? And then working here at the Leagues Club after that, having a job. They were very good to me here after my accident.
The 1960s for me, it was magic. I number one was playing football, doing what I always wanted to do. I had the support of all my family, my wife, and the world was my oyster. I was for that whole 60 period, through the advent of sport and work and goodness knows what, I was a married man. I got married in 61. I was a married man that led a bachelor's life for the 60s. I can't complain too much.
He mentioned once that he would have loved to win one for North, but he stated, he said, I play with a team of tries, and he said there's always next year.
What is the future of rugby league in Australia?
I think very great if they realise that they have the high potential here and utilise it to the best ability.
My guest this evening has been the North Sydney Rugby League coach, Mr. Roy Francis.
We were a funny team. We always had this North Sydney Malay, which seemed almost like a sickness, and it seemed to travel from one lot of players to the next. We knew when we were going to win, even if we were 15 points behind, and unfortunately we often knew when we were going to lose and we were 20 points in front. And that to me has always been the mystery of North Sydney as to why that was. On our day, we could, and we proved we could beat the very best. The next week, we'd be beaten soundly by a team that wouldn't have been able to hold a candle to the team we beat the previous week. So our history of inconsistency, I don't think I'll ever work that out.
Determined, and we just don't care who we play or who we maul. Our team's gonna rule them all. We're proud and we're tough, not stopping till we've had enough. We're mean, we're on the prowl. Our team's gonna knock them out. Every Everybody's gonna scream and shout. The red and blacks are gonna make us proud. So beware of the bears and be scared of the bears. Yes, beware of the bears. Beware of the bears. Beware of the bears.